Welcome to the Inspiring Human Potential podcast, where we talk about inner growth, entrepreneurship, purpose-driven life, and leading with and from the heart. Every person has a higher, infinite potential. It's simply about finding the way to access it and allow it to come forth through oneself, in one's everyday, every project, and every moment. One of the ways that works to access this potential, to apply it into your day-to-day life, is an inner growth journey and mindset. This is what we primarily talk about on the podcast, applied to real-life scenarios, situations, and life events that seem to hold you back, but instead are the opportunities to access your higher potential from the heart and mind and bring forth something amazing for you in your life. Subscribe now to tap into all that you can do for you in your life from the heart and mind just by being you. Hello, and welcome to my lovely Inspiring Human Potential community. To everyone tuning in, before we get started on today's topic, that is in pursuit of those keys to inner growth and following your heart to the life of an entrepreneur, and to much more that I talk about, guide about, from the podcast to the blog to other online presences which are known to those who continuously tune in. Special announcement: Anchor has allowed finally that listener support button, which means the world for everything that I pursue and wanting to share, and for those who are looking to support the Inspiring Human Potential mission, its purpose, and anyone who believes in general in inspiring human potential, because that's one of those amazing things we can do, and the online world has brought us to be able and do connect, support, and together we will achieve that harmony worldwide. So if you wish to contribute because the inner growth process mindset has contributed to your life, or because you believe in inspiring the world through these different means, please do so. Thank you so much for doing so. And as always, you can reach out if you want to collaborate, if you want to share your story, if you have a personal development process mindset, something that can contribute to others in their unlocking of their untapped unlimited potential. Reach out to me. The blog luna12780.com has my email in the about section. And let's move on to today's topic. So for today's episode, it's going to be a bit unique because we have another Be Yourself story, and this time it is by the person who raised me. Yes, my lovely mother. I asked her with all my heart if she would participate, and she did. And while with other stories, I usually expand on themes, on this one, I might not have to necessarily, because she makes a lot of good points. Obviously, as my mother, she did something a bit unique. She hears about the inner growth mindset, this journey, everything that I do all the time. So I love how she was able to answer the questions and share her connecting the dots with the aspects of unconditional love, the part of respecting other people, but while also being yourself, which is only normal. If anything, I always tell her, it is thanks to you, my lovely mother, that I have never ever doubted myself. In fact, it's funny because the only reason, the first thing that I remember is looking at her as a child and saying, I want to be strong like her when I grow up. And so the theme is about not letting fear stop you from being yourself. And you'll hear from her about that aspect and many more. So I can't wait to hear questions, thoughts, anything you'd like to share with my mother. Her name is Annagrazia. And we will be back, though, with more connecting to the inner growth aspects that we usually expand on following any story in general that we've shared so far, and as always, with a lot of thoughts on what we can do in our lives to pursue being ourselves with that heart in the forefront. So here's Annagrazia.
Hello, my name is Annagrazia, and I will be sharing with you a little bit about myself and my story. I'm very happy and excited to be part of the Inner Growth Inspirational Be Yourself story series. I am Italian, and but I lived in the States for a good 15 years. I moved when I was 18, soon after I graduated from high school. And that was one of my biggest challenge that I had to face. I was in a completely different country and related to different people, different language. I had to start all over again, and it was very exciting. I was very excited about being on my own. But that is actually what I wanted to. Since a little girl, I always wanted to travel, and I wanted to explore people, culture. So to me, it was something very, very amusing to do. Talking about challenging, I think that challenges are something that we face since we are very young, since we are born. And actually many challenges kids age reacts without unconsciously. It's just instinctively that we react to them. But as we grow up, we are not ourselves. We listen to what the world wants us to do. Parents, going to school, we make many decisions that maybe we don't want to, because we are actually not touching bases with ourselves, with our inner growth. And once we get older and we start having our first conflict or the first pain, because we have things to face that we don't like, that is when we have that impact, and we start having issue with ourselves and with what we're doing or what we have. So that is when we start the inner growth path, I think. And therefore it's just like having a thread that we unraveling. And I think that it's something very difficult, and every one of us has a hard time. There is not a person that I've met in my life that doesn't have a hard time. And mine example, the most major event that it made me be myself completely, it was when I decided to divorce. It was something that I knew that if I was doing it, it was bringing harmony and peace to myself and to the people around me. Even though I knew I was going to hurt my parents, because they didn't believe in divorcing, and they believed that, you get married and you stay with the same person forever. I had to face that, and I had to, unfortunately, be myself completely and show them that it was something that eventually it was just bringing harmony and peaceful things for everybody. And it is not easy to do it, because our action are disturbing sometimes. Many, the one that are around us, people, they always want things their way, and unfortunately you have to listen to what you want to, and what inside of you tells you and makes you feel not comfortable but peaceful. And you know when you're right, you know when you do the right things. So I would advise people to have control of the emotion. Controlling is something very important. I learned that farther in my life. And so there are major events that happen constantly, every day, or life presents us many not problems but situations that we have to relate to. And I think that in spite of what people say, you have to do what your heart tells you to do. But the most important things, that's something that I've learned and from my father and my mom actually, is to respect, to be honest, and to be sincere to you and to yourself and to others. So that is also when you do a decision that maybe go against what other people think or what they want, but it's something that it is important to respect yourself, to be honest and true, first to yourself and then to others. That's one thing that when the many things happen that I fell, and then again I restarted my whole life because of things that happen. Sometimes you feel raised, the everything is that you build, it just falls on the ground, and then you start again the whole thing. You have to get up again, and you have to start from scratch everything you've done, and it's not easy. And what made me have the strength of restart doing, it's maybe the unconditional love that I have and that I had. So there was it's something that we have to give. If we know we have unconditional love in ourselves, we have to be able to share that with people. Not so many people they have that. I am blessed and I am thankful that I've been raised with that. For the many things my parents could have been tough or strong or very rigid, but the unconditional love was what helped me, and that is something that I always give to people. I think it's very important when you acknowledge that you have it within yourself, or maybe if you don't have it, you will receive it from other people. And that is why that sharing and talking about ourselves and our story, it would make us strong. and it would come to help one with the other. So yes, I think that the unconditional love that I have for in my heart, I'm always. It was something that it was very, very potent, very strong, and it made me able to do many things. And one thing that the question here, the last one, it tells me if there is something that I to share that I don't share with the world, or that I would like to share. But yes, there is something to be afraid. I think I am afraid still. Many things that happen, so many things I need to do or face, I found myself to be afraid, and it's something that I really I'm working on it still. Being afraid, it stops you from doing things. It stops you from growing inside. It limits you, because being afraid, it's something that it doesn't allow to express yourself, and that's something that I am working on it. I'm 62, and well, the road is long, and it's okay, but that's something that I would to share with you is not to be afraid. I say aloud, and I think that that's also a good way of being overcome to this issue that I've always had. Even though I have to say I've done many things that I never thought I was capable to do. I had been by myself and raised my kids and having a career. I own a business with my family, and I am actually the one that gives strength and push them to do so. I am a very calm person, and therefore I am very proud of what I did. But still, I see that once you hold things inside from a very young age, it's very hard to overcome them. And the only way of curing some of the things we have is to share with people and to talk about things, and having people that relates to the same thing. So confronting each other, and that what probably is the key to open up and to be able to overcome our I won't say the problem, I would say more the issue. I don't think there is any problems in life if we know how to face things, if we have the strength, and if we have the peace and the harmony inside. And the journey is a very hard journey for everybody, especially in this time. Many things have been happening in the world, and it's time of transformation. I think it's time for us to move ahead and leave the old way of doing things, old way of thinking. Um, so yes, it is something that uh, just recently, the lockdown we had for about 2 months, 3 months, things that have been going on, it tell us that we need to transform and to and to go and to erase the way of we were doing things and move forward. Transformation is something that happens with challenge, but only if we are conscious of that and learning, helping, and sharing is the only way we can make this transformation happen. So I'm very happy to I've said just small little things about my life, and I'm looking forward to hear from other stories and in this project of podcast. Um, well, love to all, and thank you for listening to me.
For those of you who tune in often and have been, I'm sure that following hearing my mother's Be Yourself story, you can get a pretty good idea of the amazing and inspiring influence that I've had. Now, the funny thing is, and again, the regular listeners know, but you may be the first time tuning in here, so my mother and I butt heads a lot, of course, as I would say, any family dynamic does, but this is where sometimes I've shared with her, like, I'm just being myself and sharing my opinion. You've always supported for us to be ourselves, and she'll say yes, but not to that extreme, to that extent, since I'm very vocal with what I have to think. With family, there is no fear for me of that aspect of vulnerability in the same way we encounter with strangers or people you've just met, that politeness and or societal norm to behaviors. It's not about not being oneself. For me, it's about trying to gauge what's the best way to speak to somebody about a topic and trying to ensure I understand those aspects of vulnerability, because I know that I can, at least Maria, approach them with a different angle that won't put the person in defense mode, because we talk about this a lot. The emotional component is very important. Our inner world is connected to everything that you hear, and how you react and the way you feel about it is where you can find the growth when you turn within and take a look at your heart, your mind, what's going on, those human elements, with that neutrality and unconditional love. And then with empowerment, so choosing to be yourself, to pursue your path, and as Annagrazia was saying, with respecting others while choosing to be yourself, you can find inner harmony. With you try a new way to bring forth the inner part of you that is clashing with the outer world by working with the middle ground always, meaning you take and use something that you've experienced to pursue your growth. So you don't stop at the person, the situation, and condemn. When you guys heard about Annagrazia's leaving home at 18 and wanting to leave, there's a whole way of It may be generational. It may also be cultural. She's from Naples, Italy, as she mentioned. So these things do make a difference, even though I feel from being bicultural and then the reading of psychology, sociology expanded to throughout my college years, the world as well. I took a couple of sociology classes. One was Eastern Europe, and then another, even the gender social studies. So there are, other cultures I have at least studied academically. Then personally, I've experienced multiculturedness because I'm a military kid and my mom's from Italy, so the traveling back and forth doesn't mean I know the whole world. In fact, it's probably more that Western culture exposure, but I have a basic. What I'm trying to say is what I've seen is that there's a foundation which is similar when it comes to tradition and being yourself and the parent-child dynamic, usually feeling that you're not fulfilling. It doesn't matter the level of restraints, if you will, that that those boxes and checklists that a parent may guide you toward, because they're going to guide you. The inner world of you, we speak psychologically speaking, doesn't know. You're not consciously choosing to rebel and or pick a fight or feel bad about something when things take place with parents and children. The extreme, of course, leads to a person who is not in a place where they can necessarily build a healthy relationship with their feelings at first or with people, and that is the individual who may or may not say, you know what, I probably want to seek out something that can help me to create a new relationship with my feelings with people, because I know that I've had this experience. Human element, we all know what our upbringing is. So the part of it's not done, the inner growth, when you're a child, it's done as you grow. So she, for example, says they were taught not to be afraid. In fact, this is the part where it's interesting, as she mentions throughout her story, even at 62, she still works through the fear. This is why the title, Don't Be Afraid to Be Yourself. So this is to show it doesn't matter what age you are. Fear is a component. The awareness helps you to know it's okay, or it's here, but I choose to be myself. I choose to respect others. I choose unconditional love. And I choose to take this and make something that feels in tune with my heart, in tune with the life. You focus on being you, and that's how you become you. Unconditional love helps you to also extend that in different ways, depending on how you're going to connect the dots. Do you lead a life that eventually will go into that neutrality, or will you maybe always stay in duality and use neutrality simply to open mind and heart, evaluate, move forward? But at the end of the day, your organization of the world will always be in a dual format. My mother and I get into plenty of discussions about the world, seeing as there is no evil for me, the pure evil behind what I have always and keep on looking into. It's not that somebody presents me something, I go and do research, I go and do reading, and I always remember what it means to be human, and the conscious mind and the fear factor and the unknown elements of life, which, as we have been talking about, I see is missing from many quote-unquote experts, leaders. They don't even have it in their peripheral view that they are reacting with fear. And that is where and why, for example, I do not take anybody's word as law. And here we can tie back to the stubborn aspect, and where this is why I am who I am. All I needed to hear was be yourself, and I went with it, which is also why my mom, but you took it all the way to the extreme. When we get into our debates, why? Because there's something that I perhaps am doing or thinking, or anyways, it differs from her opinion. The beauty of it, though, is that as a parent, she has always allowed freedom of expression. Therefore, unlike when she was being raised, which was you either do it my way or you can't do it another way, I had that freedom to express. And so that's the reason for our arguments, if you will. She allowed that to an extent, always in respect. I've never cursed at her, things of that nature, but the part of being able to debate, yes, and to get to do things in a unique way, yes. Her not so much. So when she was 18 and she was finally able to go, she went and she did a lot. Then the time came when a first major choice, divorce. And that in Italy at the time, she's one of the first women to pursue that. The judgment that the society has on that. To this day, I'm 40 and I have friends who in my age group have divorced and they still have issues with it, versus America, where you're not labeled as a failed. It's not that they label in Italy either as failed, but the woman, the person, even the man, it's an issue. It's like, it's not about honor, but it's not, they feel and fear the repercussions for the children, the family dynamic. It's about family, it's about unconditional love, it's about how's the child gonna have a strong foundation, how's it gonna affect the child. The closed-minded, meaning those who are perhaps more judgmental, and that we find in every culture, they, yes, judge the woman particularly. The man does have this, it's a man, the virile, that stereotype, which I do not see any difference between many countries, all the patriarchal countries. This from my gender and sociology class was very clear. It doesn't matter where you go, unless it was a matriarchal history for that country, there is going to be that inclination, not good or bad. This is where, as a woman and someone who pursues that inner growth that I share with you guys, I say every challenge is your opportunity to be more loving, to be more of you, and to actually find a new way to establish something different that will be established once you neutralize the fact that you feel less because of something that is external. But it isn't by fighting it in the way that keeps you in a feeling of hostility. It is by being not hostile, because there's nothing to be hostile about, because that's where you speak the words by believing it and feeling it, and then you are it. And by leading with that example, you give that to the world. This is how we lead, by example. So women don't separate, they simply be and know there isn't a separation, there is diversity. For example, it sounds silly, but the more people have the feeling of knowing they're not less and acting as such, the more that is what is seen, because we are perceived by how we are also from within. This is not something hidden. The unconditional love is important because that is what your body also vibrates. It's how your mind and heart can be in flow. We've been talking about flight, fight, response. Every time something clashes, you're in hostile feeling. It's not about good or bad. If you keep it in that area, that's where you limit your potential to those two categories. If you say, hold on, neutrality, let me explore the thoughts, the feelings, and move beyond, you get to move beyond. Getting back to the whole fear thing, for example, you can see it, but if you always label it that and you don't at a certain point view your successes, you will feel that the fear is always triumphing, and that's how you're going to lead. And it doesn't help you to be yourself. So taking on a challenge has many different ways, but the importance is the awareness, one, the believing in yourself to be able to do it, and that unconditional love and neutrality to get your person in a place that allows further exploration, that allows, I can do this no matter what the age, no matter what the circumstance, I simply will keep trying to achieve my set objective while the respecting of others. And for example, The aspect of duality is one where, again, with my mother and I, we differ, because to me it's about allowing every person to be themselves, which means there's diversity. We don't all connect the dots the same way. So it's allowing, which it's not that people don't allow, it's that because the individual is not taking care of their vulnerabilities, they are engaging in a spit spat with the people about the thoughts that differ, and they, for me, waste that time doing that. But it's not obviously a waste of time, because if a person is in that place, this is their opportunity to grow, and usually this is their opportunity to work with love. So love for self. When you acknowledge that you may or may not want to do something due to others, due to an upbringing, due to tradition, due to whatever it is, your society, judgment, these feelings are important for you to acknowledge alongside the fear. The fear is yours, which is probably at a certain point easier to handle than the condemnation that can come from your society, from your parents, from family, and whatnot. That aspect, for example, has a deeper, heartfelt tug if there is not unconditional love for self. So you have two layers, the external with the fear and the unknown, which you can choose once you face it. Say, okay, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm going to take this challenge head on. I do believe in myself. The part of unconditional love, going both ways, helps you to be in a place of flow and trust and growth versus competition, which would keep you in that feeling. And it's not necessarily gonna not be there at first, because before you achieve being able to express your full self, this is where the emotions have layers and you get to work through them, meaning process, explore, pinpoint, and choose that next unconditional loving step you're going to take with who you are, as well as the circumstance and or the people. And that's the practice that we all naturally do with challenges that come forth. You pursue it further and easierly, or in a more how can I say it? It's not that it's easier. It's that by you participating and knowing it's you participate. It's not like this space that is not in your possession. You process the feelings, you feel the emotions, you feel the inner body, you work through the thoughts, and while you're thinking about things, you identify, okay, this is where I feel guilty because I've been raised to think I'm not supposed to be afraid, or because I was told that I have to do something. You recognize where it comes from. You don't blame, which is what sometimes people start, my parents this, my society this. You blaming isn't going to help you to grow or move forward. But if you can acknowledge when blame is happening, okay, hold on, I have an opportunity to do something about this right now. And you normalize it, meaning you don't condemn it. You don't put it in the good, bad category. You don't get lost in focusing on the external in that sense. You focus on your inner growth. You focus on being yourself with heart, because heart is what frees you to be your heart. If you're condemning, you're not freeing anything. You're condemning. Your heart feels that feeling. And this affects your life. And that can be part of who you are. It is part of what some people are. But this is where the empath in me and the little girl that has always felt humanity's heart, and still to this day, I will say, I feel the person's heart more and more and more. And it's always about some hurt that they can heal with love. If only they paid attention to their own heart. And that is it. Not because you don't do something to make a difference in the world, but because you're going to actually do it more. And while you're doing it, you're going to be even happier. So, for example, with my mother and I, when we argue or discuss, because for me, we discuss about things, and I present to her the neutrality and duality aspect, and I understand that she's a different generation, and she's going to do her journey anyways. I always tell her, to me, it's more about your heart. You holding on to certain things. This, I feel, because I sense it in the way you're communicating about this, it's affecting your heart. My best interest is the heart of the person, which is not only with love for themselves, but I know that means love for the external, so that then they can feel not in flight, fight, response, because there's no hurt, there's no of the ego that is still insecure. They are doing that. It's okay to be me, with the feeling that expands and extends to others, because it's acknowledging differences, doesn't need to be labeled good or bad. Okay, that's the, once you get into the advanced place of the inner growth journey, for those who will achieve it at a certain point in their life, this is where you will know, and maybe you're already there, you sense and can see the difference in what used to be duality for you and now is complete neutrality in duality, meaning you're observing all the data points, and I use the word data points, but really it's feelings and thoughts and experiences and the interactions, and you're acknowledging that everything is a possibility, but ultimately you choose where you stand from your heart, and it is with love. And so you're not in chaos, you're not in anything but participating by being yourself to the purest essence of you, because this is where, if you're in flight fight mode, meaning you're arguing, you're resisting, or not even resisting, but you're arguing, and those feelings aren't getting the love or exploration, the person who's not in that infinite human potential space and flowing heart and mind with it is you. And the person who instead through cosmic consciousness is there, and they are there because they're able to trust in themselves at that point and not fear diversity and not fear life, because you know that fear is a part of life. So when things happen, yesterday we briefly talked about unwanted, unexpected. It was a particular situation, and that is where you can always practice to be in flow with you and know, okay, I want to practice not being afraid from the heart and mind of me, by acknowledging that there's an area that is unexplored, is unwanted, but I'm gonna not be in flight fight, or I'm not gonna be in hostile, or I'm not gonna be in conflict or competition. I'm gonna be me. Again, the connecting the dots is unique to the person, so just identifying where you stand on these topics is going to already benefit you. Next place is understanding how not to let fear stop you. You allow fear to be uncondemned. You don't judge it good or bad. You don't feel ashamed of it or not. You don't condemn the people that brought it or the system that brought it. You use your mind to explore it, and then you use your heart to heal whatever parts were hurt, or at least acknowledging. So when, for example, the judgment with divorce for women, as I was sharing, or I shared a little bit about, when that takes place, doesn't mean that you immediately are over it, right? You can be conscious of, I'm okay with the choice I make and made, and you keep moving forward, but it doesn't mean you've processed the emotion completely. That only you know, and it will only happen if you are aware of this possibility, and that you then say, I'm okay with this, and you work with the self-love and the self-worth. And this is that aspect that usually psychologists, for those who will go, whether it's to coaching or psychologist sessions, that you learn about self-love, you learn about healing inner wounds and things of that nature. This is where it's not something you can't do if you want on your own, but it's where support has always guided and assisted to work with those areas. I say it whenever you're not in a place of calm or love, this is where you have that opportunity for inner growth, because that's exactly where the heart would want you to share the love, share the understanding. So with my mother, for example, when she did choose to do things her way, she eventually, how can I say this? she eventually was obviously accepted in what she chose, but it wasn't without having there to be certain things to help my grandfather primarily see that this was not really an option. It had to go that way for the best interest of his daughter. So I would say that any person who has done something that in the time of their life was not the right thing to do, but was condemning by society and parents, it's like, I kneel and applaud and share all the support and love I can, because that is something scary. And to be able and do something like that takes courage. And as I was telling you guys, I still remember the first thing the little girl is, I want to be strong like my mom when I grow up. And so when she argues or gets upset because I'm stubborn, I say, well, what did you expect me to be if you raised me? The unconditional love part is also the amazing thing that I have always received, and there's that beauty in the way that a parent can be. You're always going to be a guide to the children. This is where, as a person, I'm not a parent, but as a child, I recognize at a certain point that dynamic. This is also an opportunity for inner growth, because if you recognize the dynamic, you recognize what hurt is happening potentially, because you recognize where you want that validation. So while, for example, for me, Maria, the fact that I clashed always with my mother was that part of the ego, which psychologists talk about, that self that always wanted to imprint itself. Since you're born, you are going to have that ego, that self. And when the first no comes around, that's that first trauma. We've talked about this in previous episodes. So for me, and I know, because not only has my mother told me, but I just remember always, what I want is what I'm going to get unless I can't. So the things I couldn't, obviously, were always with the knowledge of the external world and what I was being taught and why. And this sufficed until I reached the age where I saw the inconsistencies. And that's not for this episode, but the point was, I've always spoken up and had a hard time having to listen to the adults. So I was able to make sense of it. Said, okay, this is why. And then I always remember, when I'm 18, finally I'll be able to speak my own mind, because then society will deem me an adult and I have the permission of everybody. So it was kind of funny that way for me of breaking it down. And it's definitely different than other people I've met. My twin sister, for example, it's different. And for my mother, it was different. So for her, she left home and couldn't wait to be on her own so she could do things in her own way. And when it came time to doing something she knew was right for her and her family, she went against tradition and stood her ground. And yet she continues to face challenges and the fear part, but with that unconditional love towards herself as well. And that is something that is very important, and she received from her parents as well. So this is where condemning a tradition, condemning a dynamic is not helpful to anyone who wants to pursue that more, who wants to be themselves. Naturally speaking, the dynamics can go actually both ways, and they usually do, by the way. So I remember knowing that my parent for me is my parent. So for example, I differ in my relationship with my mother. She's always going to be my mother, and there are things that I don't prefer speaking to her about, for example. My sisters differ with that. And I'm sure every person, that's a personal preference. And I acknowledge where it comes from for me. She's the person who's the figure that, mother was taught to me is X, Y, and Z. And that's where my relationship in the mind of me stands. So it's purely conceptual. Some people say, well, why not get over it? And this is where I say every person should simply focus on being themselves, which means what feels more in tune with you. You understand you by going in and exploring you. These are examples of those human elements. So, with my mother and I, we discuss because we think differently of things. So, she accepts what I speak to her, but she does not agree with it. And the feelings are not agreeable. They are disagreeable, which is why then sometimes there can still be those discussions with the quote unquote hurt feelings, even though there are no hurt feelings per se, because we both know. And that's the beauty then of communication. And for unconditional love, when it's present in family dynamics, which I would say majority of family dynamics have that. Even the ones who go through major ups and downs. I mean, the severing completely ties, those are different, and then perhaps there may not be really unconditional love in those areas, but that's for another conversation, because the family dynamic is so extensive. There's so many things that we don't know about every family, every person, and this I mean psychologically, sociologically, there's systems and things in place, but it's really the human behavior with the emotions and things we do not know have been experienced generationally. For it's just so much. This is why, to me, every person with love, that unconditional love, knowing everyone's human, everyone tries, everyone has fear, everyone has hurt, it's the best way you can approach any circumstance and allow yourself to not be afraid, or not allow fear to stop you from being yourself, and also work to do that inner growth and the removal of fear from within for those who will achieve that place eventually, and being able to stand, observe, participate, be loving, be with trust, and potentially be that support for an extensive group of people, your family, whoever, or something entrepreneurial. Getting back to this place, the way that you can label things with neutrality is by not having them stick in a way that condemns them to only being that. It's understanding the components that are part of the dynamic, and that allows you to say, okay, I'm gonna acknowledge what I feel about this and what I prefer. You respect the person by not involving them or hurting their feelings, and this is where the also healing with yourself takes place. In time, by acknowledging the things you prefer and allowing them to be, you will feel more at ease, because every time you react with somewhat of a defensive nature because you feel the parent or you, the child, is judging, you remember that dynamic. So this is where I, for example, said, I love my mother to death. I don't like when we argue this much. I'm going to work on it. And I worked on different levels because for me, one, it was that natural habit that had ensued or taken place. Then there's the part that, being Neapolitan, we have loud voices. I love being loud, though. I like being very, not loud to be loud. I like being able to freely express myself, and I have a strong tone, maybe. I don't know, it just feels right. But like my twin sister is much more calm and softer in her voice, for example. Either way, the Neapolitan way is very loud and cheerful, and this is one of those things that I love about the Neapolitans, Italians. It differs depending where you go, but that part I realized, so that's one, that's two. Then it was like, okay, and then obviously there's the me as a child wanting approval, not having it, and then me, Maria, being someone who's always definitely wanting to be myself, my person, and so having that figure be kind of the obstacle, if you will, to that, but rationally and with wisdom, knowing she's not an obstacle, because even as a child, my mother, she's the adult, she knows what's best. So the arguments that we've had, discussions, is because of my interest in learning and my strong opinions, which in sometimes she's felt, this is where I was trying, as a mother, she's felt that I, as her child, do not approve. of things, which is very interesting. I've always told her that I admire her, but she doesn't get that feeling for how I speak to her. So this is a perfect example of vulnerabilities and how every person can, with themselves, work with it. I've worked with mine, and I always do. So I share many times, and in the years as I began working with my communication with my mother, because of the unconditional love. She loves me to death. I love her. Why do we have to have this? The interest in human behavior and the knowledge as well gained as I composed the book, as I was in college, always with the psychological, sociological aspects, and then those existential. The physiological ones have been added recently, and they help to complete what will come forth when the book is out. The brain series, if you guys are new, is really great, and there should be another one soon as I finish the brain and body book on trauma. But my point is, as I gain more and more, obviously, not only me wanting to be just loving because there's no reason I should be anything else, but also understanding my person and then my mother. So for her, when she would say these things, in time I've always expanded more and more. It doesn't change our dynamic much. And this is where, if you guys tuned back a couple weeks ago or last week, I've did a podcast, Breaking Cycles Without Breaking Cycles. It's not about changing things. It's about transforming, and it's transforming because you choose inner growth with your person. You acknowledge and understand the vulnerability, and you're not, though, in duality. You're in neutrality, looking at duality. You're acknowledging the human elements. You're acknowledging the essence of you elements, and then those unknown elements of life. And you're applying unconditional love, and the fear is something you're aware of, and you're choosing once again, because you have the potential, since you're accessing your infinite human potential. That higher infinite potential is simply you and your cosmic consciousness, which is you thinking about your thoughts, basically knowing that you think things, because you live life, because you're human. You have a mind and heart, and you don't ignore the feelings, though, either. You know the feelings are indicative. As we learned in the brain series, the emotional brain is the first to develop, the first part of the brain to develop from your 0 to 2 years of age. All your flight-fight response is organized in emotional sensorial ways. Same thing goes, though, if we think once the rational brain begins to develop, and we think of psychologists who talk about child psychology. One of the things that I've read is how the first no's, we said that before, are traumatic. Therefore, you will organize either in a way that will rebel or adhere to that. Your identity. How do we get identity? Our parents. How do we learn about society? Our parents, the people who raise you. So if you're able to acknowledge these human elements without judgment or condemnation, but this is information, then you go and look at those emotions. This is where the love begins. Again, for me, for example, I unconditionally love my mother. The argument, okay, I understand why, and this is what I'm going to try to do. And then you try to do it, and you have the patience, though, without the expectation of the change by the external, for example. This is very actually important. So I, for me, have worked and still continue to work with my person, being myself, as well as achieving those goals that I've set that I want. And it isn't about changing the loud voice or the tone, because this is who I am. It's about trying to respect while finding the sweet spot, which will come in time, and without expecting to be, oh, good job, or, oh, you did that. No, there's no expectations that the external will have to change or not. It's not about the external. So, for example, this is one of those points where my mother and I would differ. For her, there are certain things that I should take into consideration. Yes. And I don't. And this is where, for me, I say, I have a right to respect my person and another person, and people don't have to hang out with each other. These are, for example, things that every one of you connects those dots again on your own, and that's where you will continue moving forward, if you allow unconditional love to be there, if you allow respect of others to be there, if you allow your person to navigate the mind and heart of you to find your flow, you allow inner growth to happen, you allow yourself to be yourself, you will feel more of you coming forth, and this slowly grows into something amazing and empowering, but also less scary. So when the challenges come, not only does fear not stop you, but you're also very full of that love at heart for the life you lead, for the people you have around you, and you look forward to continuing to try to be yourself to the best of your ability, and with that knowledge that tomorrow's another day, today's the day that you get to face one thing, and that it doesn't matter when, it's not about the end, right? It's about the appreciation and living life with courage and heart and honesty and the love for being able to do that, and to allow yourself to work with the people that you love as well. I look forward to hearing about your thoughts and experiences on the topic, so call in on Anchor or leave a voice message. And you can also always email me. You find the email in the About section on the blog, luna12780.com, and on the website, inspiringhumanpotential.com. PSS, I have added to the Be Yourself story series an transformational entrepreneurial story series. So we're going to have... my mother's going to be one of the entrepreneurs that I interviewed, and I already have my first entrepreneur, and I need to simply set this up. I got his interview recording recently and finalizing it. If all goes well, by this week for sure. So stay tuned, and giving you guys all my love, all my hugs. Talk to you again soon.